Chapter 1345, Meeting Again. Klein turned around and looked at the familiar, yet unfamiliar figure. He had imagined all kinds of attacks on Utopia, but he had never expected such a scene to occur. If Ammon had parasitized the marionette, Jayaman Sparrow, then with Klein's current status and the spirit worms on Sephra Castle, he definitely would have immediately discovered the problem. And if Zeratul were to swap the spirit body threads, he could only temporarily hide it from him. Furthermore, he needed help from an angel like a knowledge emperor or a servant of concealment to ensure the element of surprise in the sudden attack. Only the humanity provided by a spectator could slowly ferment, without revealing any abnormalities on the surface. To prevent such a situation, he could only sever the spirit body threads and allow the marionette to deteriorate till it died. That way, regardless of whether it had any humanity in it or not, it would ultimately cease to exist. Unfortunately, Klein had never heard of such methods before. All he did was guard against the invasion of a virtual persona on his marionettes. This might be the power of a visionary, giving life to everything virtual and immaterial, a unique sense of humanity. The carved and cold face was reflected in Klein's eyes as he felt a force pushing him away. He immediately fell backward, falling from the layers of ruins of the old metropolis out from the fog of history. During this process, he wanted to control himself, but there was nothing he could do. This was because the wooden stake at his heart had sealed all his beyonder powers. With a thought, Klein looked at Jayaman Sparrow and snapped his fingers. Puh! The worms of spirit in Sephra Castle received his will and gave up the marionette's spirit body threads. They also picked up the Staff of the Stars and prepared to give Klein a fatal blow so as to commit suicide. After his main body completely died, Klein would be able to revive above the gray fog and escape from his predicament. He no longer held any hope after finding out that Adam was the mastermind behind the scenes. At this moment, a stone square floating in the void appeared beneath Klein's feet. Black stone pillars rose up and propped up a grand and holy cathedral, enveloping Klein inside. The Corpse Cathedral, Adam's Corpse Cathedral, the divine kingdom of a visionary. Boom! Countless bolts of silver lightning smote down from Sephra Castle, penetrating the fog of history and struck the cathedral, but failed to shake it at all. At the same time, in the ancient palace, the figure sitting in the fool's seat suddenly collapsed to the side, forming a vortex formed from transparent maggots. The vortex extended out slippery and strange tentacles, crazily smacking the surroundings, overturning the junk pile, and destroying the long-modeled table. Klein's avatar had lost contact with his true body, and because his true body hadn't really died, they had lost control and went crazy, just like Zeratul from before. In the old metropolis before the first epoch, Jayaman Sparrow, who was wearing a half-top hat and a black trench coat, looked up at Sephra Castle, his expression mixed. He was basically a corpse. After his spirit body threads were abandoned, he naturally couldn't maintain his existence. The only thing Adam gave him was humanity. There was no envisioned life for him, as that would result in the discovery of there being something wrong with Jayaman Sparrow. Jayaman Sparrow slowly collapsed as he looked at the rooms in the old metropolis. He died in this ruin. Klein's feet landed on the ground and stood in the middle of the cathedral. He saw that every arch of each pillar was embedded with the skulls of different races. Most of them were pale white in color as they were packed densely together, staring at the intruder with their hollow eyes. On the walls, windows, and doors of the cathedral, transparent, distorted, and painful faces appeared, separating the interior from the outside world. And in front of the cathedral stood a cross that was more than 100 meters tall. In front of the cross were rows of black pews. Adam, who was wearing a simple white robe and had a pale gold beard, was standing under the cross with a silver cross hanging from his neck. He faced the pews like a priest who was preparing to deliver a sermon. His expression was warm and his eyes were limpid, as though he was only inviting Klein to listen to the scriptures. Klein lowered his head and looked at the cross-shaped wooden stake that was stuck in his chest. He slowly walked to the first pew and sat in the middle. For a true mythical creature formed from many worms of spirit, the wound on its chest wasn't fatal. The main purpose of the ancient bloody cross stake was to seal his beyonder powers. If not for the true God standing in front of him, Klein could have used his physical strength to pull out the wooden stake and remove the seal. At this moment, he didn't make any attempts because he was afraid that he would turn the thought of not daring to not willing to. I didn't expect you to directly interfere in this matter. If you wanted to deal with me, you didn't have to wait until today. Klein looked at his blood-stained shirt and seriously voiced his doubts. He wasn't afraid at all, as if he was certain that Adam wouldn't kill him. Adam held the silver cross pendant with one hand and calmly said, "Before now, you were able to be of quite some use in many ways." He took 2 steps forward and continued with limpid eyes. "When Ammon came to steal the corpse cathedral, I made a deal with him. By helping me obtain the first blasphemy slate, I'll help him capture you." "Is that so?" Klein was instantly enlightened. On the one hand, Adam didn't wish to be obstructed by existences like the true creator when he became a god, and on the other hand, he wanted to obtain the first blasphemy slate. Therefore, he used the unshadowed crucifix and other methods to give Klein an impetus to head for the giant king's court, open the door to the chamber where Sasrir was sleeping, and attract the attention of the true creator and other existences. On the other hand, he used his brother Ammon to steal the first blasphemy slate at the critical moment. And to capture Klein, who was about to obtain preliminary control of Sephra Castle, it would definitely be most appropriate to have a visionary arrange the developments for him. Although Ammon and Adam usually appear distant, they are still brothers and can work together more easily. Klein nodded slightly and looked at the stained glass that had distorted faces. "I also didn't expect Zeratul to cooperate with you. Is he afraid of becoming food for Ammon?" When Klein established Utopia, he had considered Ammon's attack and Zeratul's destruction. However, he never expected that they would work together in a certain way. From his point of view, the chances of Zeratul completely siding with the Mother Tree of Desire were higher than this, unless Adam had unknowingly arranged such a development for him. Adam's limpid eyes showed sympathy. To him, you becoming a great old one means that he will definitely perish. However, if Ammon becomes one, as long as he expresses his loyalty, he can still retain his present level and status. A Lord of the Mysteries still requires an attendant of mysteries. Therefore, he chose to cooperate with me. During this process, if he can seize the opportunity and turn you into a marionette before I do, using you to enter Sephra Castle and become the owner of the Sephra, then he has the right to demand an opportunity to face Antigonus at Evernight's place and have an ultimate showdown with Ammon. On the contrary, he will completely admit defeat and pledge allegiance to Ammon. On this point, he was very decisive. "It doesn't seem like your style to explain so much," Klein replied casually before frowning. "You don't need all the sequence 1 beyonder characteristics of the corresponding pathway to become a great old one." He had deduced this from the relationship between the ancient sun god and the 8 kings of angels. However, he believed that one had to first become a great old one or a quasi-one before dividing the characteristics. Adam replied gently, "For neighboring pathways, all that's needed is a uniqueness and a sequence 1 beyonder characteristic. It's easy to lose control if one forcefully occupies more. Therefore, after Zeratul pledged allegiance to Ammon, he still has the chance to become a king of angels. And he isn't able to pledge allegiance to you because he can't separate a sequence 2 avatar like those from the Marauder pathway, and then stealing his main body's spirit body, consciousness, and psyche over, turning the avatar into the main body. This was the qualitative difference between a seer's marionette and a marauder's worm of time. The former involved spirit body threads, while the latter relied on themselves. Furthermore, the reason the marauder angel could do this was because there, sequence 2 was Trojan Horse of Destiny. Just as Klein nodded, he suddenly saw Adam turn his body, revealing something beneath the cross. It was a gray stone slab. There were many mottled marks on its surface, making it look rather ancient. This was very similar to the first blasphemy slate, but it didn't have that abnormally ancient feeling to it. It also had words that looked like the source of all languages. They were written with the names of sequences and potion formulas. The second blasphemy slate, Klein asked in surprise. His gaze quickly swept across the stone slab. He didn't read the first few paragraphs, but instead looked at the last few lines. His intuition told him that there was a very important piece of information there. There's no need to rush. Ammon has to complete the ritual and become a sequence 0 before stealing your fate. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to withstand the identity as Sephra Castle's owner. And before that, it's best to let you continue staying in my kingdom. Adam acted as though he was consoling a repentant. Kill me, Klein muttered inwardly. At this moment, he figured out the last few lines. God Almighty, Creator, Maker, the Omnipotent and Omniscient, Lord of the astral world. Sea of Chaos plus Visionary Uniqueness plus the Sun Uniqueness plus Tyrant Uniqueness plus White Tower Uniqueness plus the Hanged Man Uniqueness plus one Author Beyonder characteristic plus one White Angel Beyonder characteristic plus one Thunder God Beyonder characteristic plus one Omniscient Eye Beyonder characteristic plus one Dark Angel Beyonder characteristic. Lord of the Mysteries, King of Spacetime, Beacon of Destiny, Embodiment of Sephra Castle, Dominator of the Spirit World. Sephra Castle plus the Fool Uniqueness, plus Error Uniqueness plus Door Uniqueness, plus one Attendant of Mysteries Beyonder characteristic, plus one Worm of Time Beyonder characteristic, plus one Key of Stars Beyonder characteristic. Upon seeing this, Klein turned his head to look at Adam and asked in puzzlement, "Why are you showing me these? Wouldn't it be safer to hypnotize me and put me to sleep until Ammon becomes a god?" Adam's eyes were clear as he said with a warm expression, "To be frank, if the other party was Ammon, then I'd be more willing to help you become the dominator of the spirit world. We have too many things in common. In a sense, we are old friends who have met before." With that said, he smiled and said, "We meet again, Mysteries."